Hello and welcome back to Future You, the podcast brought to you by graduate careers experts Prospects. I'm your host, Emily Slade, and in this episode I chat to Jake, who works as a barrister.
So my name's Jake Newell and I'm a barrister at East Anglian Chambers. So in terms of the bar, barristers have quite a broad role. We go to court, we advise our clients in conference, and sometimes we do what's known as paperwork, like written work, which can be drafting a case right at the beginning, or we give our opinion on a particular case. So it's quite a mixed, varied job, which is quite nice. You're also self-employed, so I get to take time off whenever I want, assuming that there isn't a case in the diary. It's really quite a flexible role, really.
Yeah, wow. Oh my God, I didn't know that. So let's go right back to the beginning. Mm-hmm. What's the bar?
So the bar is basically this institution that each barrister belongs to. I guess when barristers say the bar, it means like the bar exams or the Bar Standards Board or the Bar Council, who are, the people that kind of regulate us or, update us with our training. But at the bar, it's particularly like practitioners, barristers who, go to court, do the advisory work. So it's pretty much an umbrella term for the profession generally, because if you say the bar in the UK, it means specifically barristers as opposed to solicitors. But then weirdly enough, if you go to say the US and you say the bar, it's just every lawyer because, it's slightly different out there.
Okay. And you're self-employed?
Yeah.
Is that standard across the board? Every barrister in the UK will be self-employed?
So if you're not employed by a company, so let's just take a local insurance company, for example. If they have their own in-house team, you are employed by them and they are your client. If you're a member of Chambers, and this is where it gets a little bit weird and I have to explain it to everyone because they're like, what is this setup, this dynamic? Most barristers are self-employed, but we become members of Chambers, which are like a group or association of barristers that specialise in one area. So whilst I'm self-employed, I'm also a member of East Anglian Chambers, and we pay each month towards our clerks, our rent, that kind of stuff. So it gives us a space where we can go and do our work, or we get cases allocated to us and things like that.
Okay, so in terms of getting cases, as a self-employed person, do you have to find them yourself?
At the beginning of your career, when you're quite junior, I still am quite junior, the clerks will help you kind of push you in the right way, give you a bit of direction to say, this is where you should be thinking, because you won't have those connections to start with. After a while, there is somewhat of an expectation that you're able to bring your own work in. And I'd like to think I'm quite heavy-handed with that, actually, because I go out all the time with the local solicitors, network, just have chats, go for coffee, that kind of stuff. Because a lot of this job is you've got to be seen, you've got to be present, and it's also reputation-based. So, the more marketing you do in terms of putting yourself out there, the more likely you are to attract work. You do like a LinkedIn post on an update in the law or whatever, and that can sometimes generate work for you because they'll think, Jake's done a post on that, so he knows what he's talking about. And then next thing you know, you've got a phone call coming through saying, can you do this case on that day? Which is quite nice, actually. So, yeah.
Oh, incredible. That's so cool. So what was your educational journey?
So mine was quite a drawn-out one in terms of I did my undergrad at Essex in 2011, graduated in 2014. And one thing that I would say right now for any listener is don't expect an immediate result with the bar. It's always going to be a slow burn, and a lot of people get quite disheartened by that, but you'll see from my story that perseverance will get you there. So yeah, I did my undergrad at Essex, and it was really amazing 3 years, but it was also when I look back, I guess, quite a bizarre 3 years because I went in very, nervous, very shy, very withdrawn. And then after 3 years, I'm president of LawSoc and I'm this completely different kid. And I'm like, how did that happen? That's where I did my undergrad. I took a few years out afterwards, just getting some life experience and growing up because with this particular job, you're working with vulnerable clients, you're working with people that are stressed out. There's a lot of pressure on you and you need to be able to handle that. And I knew at 21, that wasn't, the situation that I wanted to be in. So I did that. Then I did the bar exams for a year in London, did my master's degree part-time after that, and then between then and starting in 2022, I basically did a series of legal jobs just to get that experience and really tailor the CV. So it's quite a drawn out one.
Yeah, and is that the usual process, sort of undergrad, masters, like bar exams, masters?
There are a couple of iterations. So most people would do a law degree, then they'll do the bar exams, and then straight on to pupillage. If you're a nerd like me, you want to do your masters, and that's what the masters was. It was just fun for me, really, because it's in an area of law that I don't actually practice in at the moment. It's more of a, my genuine interest and love. But you get a lot of people now that don't do a law degree, which is really good actually, because you learn different kind of skills and how to approach things slightly differently. They'll do what's known as the GDL, which is the Graduate Diploma in Law. So it's basically a conversion from, let's say, philosophy into law. Then they'll do the bar exams, then they'll go on to pupillage. So you can kind of do that sideways move as well.
Yeah. And do you get to choose which area of law you work in?
Yeah, that's the beauty of being self-employed, is that if I want to turn around and say I don't want to do crime anymore, for example, I don't have to do it. I mean, when you're at the junior end, there's more of an expectation that you do a bit of everything, kind of see where your strengths are, what you're interested in. And I think for the listeners as well, it's really important to have that open mind. 18-year-old Jake wanted to be a criminal barrister, then he wanted to be completely commercial, and then he found himself, actually, you know what, I like what I'm doing in terms of common law and all these different bits and pieces. So the ability is there for you really to create your own practice as you move along. And I guess when you apply for pupillage at different chambers, because different chambers specialise in different areas, that kind of gives you an indication of where you're likely to end up.
Yeah. You mentioned your clerks. Would you start off as a clerk, or is that an entirely different segment of job?
Yeah, different segment altogether. So my clerks are amazing. I have to say that they are fantastic. And, without them, we would be lost. It's dealing with solicitors, it's getting the papers in, it's diary management. They deal with so many problems behind the scenes to make our lives easier when we go to court. And it's a completely different skill set, but you don't have to be a clerk to be a barrister. They're usually quite separate.
So can you describe a typical day in your role?
No. The reason I say no is not to be difficult. There is no typical day. And that's both the beauty, but also the scary, ugly side of being self-employed, I guess, in that one day you'll be in court, you've got a nice long case and you know what you're doing. And then let's say tomorrow I'm meant to have another case, but that comes out the diary last minute because the court have taken it out of the listings. They've not got judges, or it's settled. You're kind of then at the mercy of whatever's going on around you, sort of thing. And like the past 3 weeks for me, for example, have been really good examples of that, where, this week I'm doing purely paperwork. I'm going away over the weekend. So I'm trying to get ahead of myself. Last week I was in court every single day. And then the week before that was a very quiet one. So it's kind of like there are no 2 days that are the same, which I know is a bit of a cliche, but this really does push you to that limit. And you have to be quite flexible with it. You have to kind of embrace that unknown nature of the beast, I guess. So
is it very freelance in that you could be summoned in on a weekend at random at last minute? Like, is the flexibility like you almost can't go to sleep at night because you might be waiting for a phone call, or is there some structure? There
is some structure. So when I was a pupil doing my training, we used to do like weekend cover shifts for domestic violence protection orders, and you'd basically be on call all of Friday, and then you'd get a phone call to say either we need you in on the Saturday morning to go to the magistrates to do one of these cases, or you don't have to go in, you're fine. So there are some circumstances where you do need to be on call, but it's not a situation where, my client's going to call me at 3:00 in the morning and be like, right, you need to be in court first thing to do X, Y, and Z. Although that's just my practice. There are some areas of law where you do need to make, emergency applications. And I know in the High Court, they always have a judge who's on call to deal with these emergency applications. So their phone's on loud. They might get a call at 2:00 in the morning. We need this emergency injunction for X, Y, and Z. And then they've got to wake up and actually deal with it all. So, yeah.
So what's the best piece of advice you can give to somebody that's starting out?
Oh, that's a good one. I could probably do a lecture on that alone, really. I think the first thing is really perseverance. Like if you want it bad enough, you have to fight for it. I remember the first barrister I ever came across, and I to this day I still keep in touch with him. I was 17, bumped into him at a talk at my sixth form back in Grays in Essex, and he said, this was his opener, by the way. This wasn't a situation of like, I'll slide this into the conversation. It's one of you will be lucky to get to the bar, and there are like 100 students, and we were like, right, okay, that's that's great. Wait to give us a pep talk there. Cheers. But that, he was right. It's one of those things that you have to fight tooth and nail for, because you have to get to uni and get a good grade. You have to get all the, little additional bits and pieces on top of that. So whether it's your mooting, which is your legal debating skills, shadowing barristers, shadowing solicitors, judges, that's all very much the basic element of an application for pupillage, because everyone's done it. And you've got to remember that you're always against someone that's got, a stellar CV or these stellar, grades and experiences. So it's all about pitching yourself. And I found with pupillage applications in particular, they're not like normal job applications, because you're kind of given a question of, for example, why would you be a good barrister? 200 words max, go. And it's kind of like, okay, right, I need to do that in 200 words, talk about myself and showcase. How am I going to do that? And I learned you have to be quite punchy with them. So I started doing bullet points. But the thing is, you don't learn that until maybe 2 or 3 years into actually applying, by which time a lot of people, quite understandably, would have been disheartened and said, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm not good enough. And, it's really not the case, because I've had feedback in the past where, the difference between being on the reserve list and getting an offer is one of you answered the question a little bit more elaborately than the other one. And you're talking about the finest of margins. So, just because you don't get pupillage first time, second time, or even third time, doesn't mean you're a bad candidate. It just means, luck of the draw, really. So,
what would you say does make a good candidate? Are there certain skill sets or personality types that would work better as a barrister than others?
Yeah, I think you have to be comfortable with pressure. I think that's the big one, because you're going to have clients that are worried, stressed, angry. You're going to have a judge who's sometimes annoyed, and you've got to be able to read the room and try and, persuade the judge to give you what you want without annoying them too much. And I guess kind of linked into that is your communication skills. You need to be able to put a point across quite well, and there are a number of ways you can do that. So, for example, the approach I always take with law is, yes, it's this fabulous concept and it's quite complex. And it's really interesting for me academically. But a client's not going to care about that. A client's going to want to know, yes, no, can I do this? Can I do that? How much do I have to pay? How much can I receive? So in some ways, you've got to translate law into, everyday English, which is another skill that you really have to have. Interpersonal skills, being pragmatic, being practical. It's, as I say, sometimes you've got to read the room, or you have to find a creative solution when your client's back is against the wall sort of thing. And you think, right, how can I get out of this in a way that kind of saves them as best as I can, sort of thing. On top of that, you need to be quite academic. But, as I say, chambers are probably going to go with someone who has, let's say, a 2-1, but can talk to people and is confident, as opposed to someone with a starred first who runs out the door whenever a client gets a little bit kind of touchy about something. So, yeah.
Any myths that you'd like to debunk?
Anything you watch on TV. Anything on TV.
Legally Blonde wasn't a documentary.
No. You go here?
What, like it's hard?
No, sadly not. It's not like that. It's not a situation where, even with Suits, you can do these underhand things. We've got an ethical obligation to not mislead the court. We've got a handbook that we have to follow and abide by. So any of these kind of things where it's like, oh yeah, I'll just, hold this back and produce it in court last minute.
Right.
It doesn't work like that, because there's this thing called disclosure, where you have to basically hand over all of your documents that are relevant to the case. And that includes both documents that are helpful to your case, but then also prejudicial to your side in terms of, they go against your point. It's very different in that regard, which is, it's a lot less glamorous, because I've had many pupils, basically like work experience students, follow me around, which in itself's really weird as a junior, because you're like, I've only been doing this for 2 years and you're following me and asking me questions like I'm the specialist. okay, there are still days that I learn things, for the first time. But yeah, it's one of those situations where the hard work behind the scenes is pretty much the job. Yeah, we go into court, we wear the wig, we wear the gown, we make the arguments, but a lot of the prep behind the scenes is where you make those fundamental points, and you're going to have to cross-examine. Cross-examination is terrifying as well. I can imagine, I've seen it in my clients' faces where they've just, really gone into their show and like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
But I find that when you're at the junior end, you do what's known as small claims track cases. So it's like the very small cases. And they're quite informal. And a lot of people, when they come to court, they're expecting, everyone to be wigged and gowned, everyone to be robed, judge to be on a bench, a lot higher than you looking down. But in the small claims track, you don't wear your wig and gown. It's quite informal.
Oh.
So it's quite a shock to them when, they see that situation unfolding and they're like, this is nothing like TV.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is why I keep telling you, don't watch Legally Blonde and think that's how we work. So
That's a shame.
it is. But then, it's still a good fun job because there is still an element of theatricality to it. You go to court and,
like Chicago.
Yeah, the way you put your questions to a witness, or the way you make a submission, putting emphasis on certain words can have a huge impact. And it's quite a lot of fun, I have to say.
It does sound really exciting, but on the flip side of that, there must be days where you lose.
Yeah.
And is that tough, or do you just have to take it on the chin and move on?
I think there's a bit of both, really. I think in some cases in some cases they'll really hit you. Let's say for like a family law case, for example, when the case is about parents having contact with children. That would hit me a lot more than, say, a sum of money, because a sum of money, I take the view that money's quite common, but a relationship with a child, if you're a parent, is fundamentally different. So there are some cases where, you sit there and you think that was really quite sad. I did the best that I could, but the court's gone against us, for whatever reason. Conversely, there are some cases where you look at the papers and it's a dead duck, and you have to then be the one that says to the client, look, I read this. This is my professional opinion. I think you're going to have a really tough time. Sometimes they'll want to go into court for, the principle of it really more than anything else.
Yeah.
And those cases, you get absolutely bodied. And you think, I did my best. And sometimes there is an element of, I lost that one. I know it was a bad case, but it still has kind of an impact on me.
Yeah.
But then it's the way you bounce back from that, which counts. You've got to be able to dust yourself down and move on again. We've all had cases that we've lost, and you're only as good as the facts of your case. There is no lawyer like Harvey Specter where, you win 100% of the time.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to just pick and choose our clients because we like the look of their case. As much as that would make our reputations a lot, bigger and bolster us because we could claim to have not lost a single case.
Yeah.
Access to justice is a much more important fundamental point in our society. So
yeah. Oh, amazing. Oh, this sounds really cool. I'm not gonna go get a law degree anytime soon.
I mean, if you ever wanted to later on in life, you could do, because that's again one of the beautiful things about the bar is people do it as a second career. So I've had a couple of students follow me around. I say students, they're older than I am. But, they've done a degree and then gone on to say like medicine, insurance, sales, whatever. And then they thought, actually, I'm going to try my hand at the bar.
Cool.
And that's really quite interesting because then you get to see things from a completely different perspective.
Yeah.
Because I always have this habit of going for coffee afterwards with my minis just to kind of talk about the bar, what to expect, and answer any questions they have. And when you talk to someone who's had that second kind of perspective of things, it completely changes the way you look at law, which is quite nice. It makes you a bit more rounded.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. That's so interesting. So do you find there's a lot of people that are there sort of second go career-wise?
I think it's growing, actually. I mean, it used to be this unheard of thing where, you would go and do a law degree and it would be bar, 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 that's it. But now those days have changed and it's gone, and I think for the better, actually, because it gives you, those fresh perspectives. It gives you the ability to look at things slightly differently, learn maybe about things in practice as well. So, if you've got someone who's got a medical background and they've been a doctor for 4 or 5 years, then they come to the bar, they're going to be a lot better placed in a personal injury claim than I am because they've got the medical background. So, it's advantageous in a lot of circumstances, which is quite good.
Oh, Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
I've run out of questions. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention?
I mean, in terms of the bar generally, one thing that a lot of people don't kind of think about are their Inns of Court and their scholarships. Now, I was quite lucky when I applied, I got a scholarship, and I'll be completely transparent. That's how I funded the bar exams, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do it. So typically we have 4 Inns of Court. We have Middle Temple, Inner Temple, Lincoln's and Gray's. I'm part of Middle, and I think they're fantastic. When it comes to thinking about doing the bar exams, you need to be a member of one of those 4 Inns.
Right.
Typically, they do the same kind of thing. They provide you training and education opportunities, and you have to do 12 qualifying sessions, which is like going to dinners or going to certain events with them before you can be called to the bar. But one thing that I really try to push students to consider is the scholarship element. 2 of them, Middle and Inner, at the time of recording anyway, they interview absolutely everyone. So you put a paper application in, regardless of how good or bad it is, you'll still get an interview. Whereas Lincoln's and Gray's, they'll do a paper sift. So paper applications go in, they'll take, say, the top 10, 15%, then they interview them. And that's quite important for me to kind of outline to everyone, because if you're not very good on paper in terms of, I don't like writing about myself, but I can have a conversation with people, go for Middle or Inner, just because then you know that you've got the safety net of the paper behind you, but you're more comfortable talking to people. If you want to hedge your bets and you feel more confident on paper, apply to Lincoln and Gray's, but you've got that element of you have to be very good to kind of get to that interview stage. So that would be something that I would think about, just in terms of practical application. But anything you do in life, I found, is really, really quite useful for a pupillage application more generally. So when I was at uni, I worked in the SU bar, so I did like a bit of catering, bit of the bar stuff as well. And things like that are still directly relevant, because you might think, well, how's serving someone like, I don't know, a plate of food or a pint, how is that relevant to being a barrister? And it is, because, if you're working a late shift, people are getting rowdy, they're drunk. Certain things may happen when people are drunk. It increases the chances that someone's vulnerable. You have to be able to deal with that. And, circumstances like that, working in a team, communicating with people, working under pressure, they're all the skills you need to be a barrister. You just have done it in a slightly different way. So I would encourage people to use that, because it shows an element of personality as well. Like you have to be able to conform to the standards of the bar, i.e. you need to dress a certain way and you need to behave professionally and all of that stuff. But I found that if you retain parts of your personality, you can kind of put them in a safe way. So for me, I'm a massive comic book nerd, right? So my cufflinks are Superman ones. So I always wear these, and the client will look at them and they'll be like, oh my God, that's pretty cool.
You're a human.
Exactly, you're a human being. And, that wins clients over, because they see you are a person. You're not just this, I don't know, holier than thou kind of being that does their case and then walks away again. So show some personality as well, and that can be through your sport. Include that in your applications as well. It doesn't have to be specifically legal in terms of legal work. Don't do anything illegal, kids. That's the big takeaway here. So yeah, do that, because when the interviewers are reading through these applications, and you need to remember there are about 300, 400 applications for 2 spaces. You've got to stand out. And if it's just, oh yeah, I've written this dissertation, I've done this in law and done that in law, that's all well and good, but put something else in that's a little bit rogue, something a little bit different, and then it allows them to kind of say, well, I want to find out more about that. I want to know more about this person because they've said this, and that sounds quite interesting. So yeah, tie it up as much as you can and make it all relevant.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
No, thank you for the invitation and having me on.
Thanks again to Jake for their time. For more information on becoming a barrister or getting into law, head to prospects.ac.uk. All links are in the show notes below. For a full-length video version of this episode, check out our YouTube channel at FutureUPod. If you enjoyed the episode, feel free to leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. Thank you, as always, for listening, and good luck on your journey to Future You.